Now, of course, it hasn't been. 10 years ago, we were in another studio, a nicer studio,
Right.
frankly, not significantly nicer, but there was more of a support
And there was
staff.
way more commercial breaks.
There was way more commercial breaks. We won't have any today.
Right.
And yet we were talking about a war in Iraq. Now, I know how sentimental you get, and that's why.
It was such a wonderful time in my life. I mean, really, just the constant hate mail that we would get, and going on TV programs and talking to infants and bullies, and then even at the street level, being confronted by post-reading Fox watchers who
Yeah, it
made
was so
their
nice for people to come up to you.
opinions known to me,
Right.
or at comedy shows phoning in bomb threats, things of that nature. Oh, those were the days.
Well, now,
The days.
fortunately for you, Janeane,
Yes.
we now have a Democratic president, a Nobel Peace Prize winner,
Yeah,
who
sure.
is engaging in another war. This one's a little bit different.
Boots on the ground, boots on the ground, boots on the ground. I'm gonna do a remix of boots on the ground, boots on the ground, boots on the ground. Existential threat, boots on the ground, existential threat. Boots
No,
on
is
the
it existential or imminent?
That there's two. There's the existential threat to our way of life,
Right.
and the imminent threat that is always posed to us. But existential, I've been hearing a little more often by retired generals who it is not never disclosed who they're being paid by
Well,
to
I
push
mean,
for more military
I think we now
intervention.
all know they're being paid by. They're sitting on the board of some war profiteering
Well, a
company.
number of they'll be consulting at a type of think tanks that Lynn Cheney is in, or they'll be, you know, on various and sundry different boards that they get paid in annual, sometimes in cash and stock options. You know, I mean, but they never disclose that on the.
No, why
on the
would
news.
that? Why would that influence what they have to say? I mean, the fact
it
is,
wouldn't. It wouldn't.
It actually probably, I think to a certain extent, it probably wouldn't. But they're in that game, right?
Oh,
I
it
mean,
absolutely. That's what they do now. That's
Right.
what their job is to on behalf of the industry, the military industrial. I don't want to say complex, whatever like
complex.
Boeing or
Right.
any of these contracts, and also Blackwater, which isn't Blackwater anymore. I think they're called Academy. Academy. Places like that.
Academia.
Academi, something like that, and they are paid handsomely to do just that, to go on and ramp up threats and to push for, and then we as the viewer are supposed to say, oh, these guys must be telling us the truth. They're retired generals. They must know what they're talking about. But it's all in service of.
Of course.
I actually tend to listen to Lawrence Korb a little more. We interviewed him. He seemed like a reasonable guy. I don't know. I don't know who he may or may not be working for, but
My guess would be somebody who's paying.
but he
him
was
to-
very reasonable about Iraq when we interviewed him.
Well, a lot of people who are reasonable about Iraq now seem to have sort of, the perspective has certainly changed. Like I don't watch that much cable news anymore, but even on,
You're
like
on it.
on MSNBC,
MSNBC.
rarely, but even on MSNBC, it all seems to be at best just sort of like just reporting the facts. Like the opinion seems to have sort of dissipated a little bit in the course of this bombing campaign. And there were polls out. We have this is I don't know this. I don't want. As you know, Janeane.
Yes, Sam. What do I know?
It didn't seem like
What do
there
I
was a
know?
lot of argument from Democrats as to whether or not the extended war in Iraq was a problem, at least maybe not so much at the beginning, frankly. But we have Democrats 64% in favor of fighting. Let's see, military action in the United States taking place in Iraq and Syria against Islamic militants, commonly known as ISIS. Do you approve or disapprove of this military action? Democrats 64%, Republicans 65%. So basically, no difference there.
Who did this poll?
This is Gallup. There is a disparity, and you know what? That seems to be what all the other polls have shown, that when it comes to air war, why not drop a couple of bombs?
But it is, Paul Rieckhoff has been talking about how this still does involve,
of course,
personnel and casualties, and and people want to distance themselves from it, but
you know
it's
what?
not different.
I don't think in terms of a public opinion, when we talk about the death of, there's ultimately going to be a plane or two shot down. There will be maybe some special ops people killed. We may or may not be made aware of it. And I don't think that's going to have a significant change in public opinion. Would you favor or oppose the United States sending ground troops to Iraq and Syria in order to assist groups in those countries? Democrats then say 30%, only 30% favor, 63% oppose. Independents 35, 59. Republicans approve by a 61 to 36% majority. So that tells me a couple of things. One, we have relaxed. Democrats have relaxed their perception of what is really war on some level. That it takes ground forces to be real war for Democrats, and it also tells me that Republicans not so isolationists as we are led to believe.
Well, they aren't. Since when are they?
Right, but that's
I guess Rand Paul.
Right, that's the idea.
Depending on the day, but I'm actually surprised that Republicans are supporting anything and not being contrary to whatever Obama said.
Well, I think on some level it is maybe just driven by the fact that President Obama has been saying, whether or not that will be the case, that there will be no
boots on the ground.
And so maybe they're just
blood and treasure.
Maybe that's
blood
their way
and treasure,
of being
boots
contrarian.
On the ground, blood and treasure.
Indeed. I mean, but we have achieved, it seems to me, peak eternal war, right? I mean, this has
been going on since after World War I, but especially after World War II. Do you know how much
kinetic
war
activity
we've been at in a way since World War II? And a lot of people even forget Korea. I mean, come on, did MASH teach us nothing? You saw how long that conflict was by watching MASH.
Well, but
the Korean War.
after Vietnam, at the very least, there was supposedly no appetite for an open-ended war. One would have expected the same
no
with
appetite
Iraq.
for making it public as much, but
Right.
the military,
Right.
our military presence expanded, but especially in the early 70s, as there were movements in the Middle East to nationalize their resources. That was part of the reason that people were being moved to Texas for Exxon and stuff like that. They were consolidating everything, but a lot of it some of it had to do with starting in 72, 73. There were leaders in the Middle East who wanted to stop giving all the profits from their resources to American companies and British companies. And that we increased our military presence in the area. And there were gas and oil and energy companies who started consolidating their resources domestically. And part of that was the reason my dad was transferred in 73 to Texas the first time, but also because there's resources there in Texas. But I think that was just a consolidation, if that makes sense. You know what
Yes.
I mean? Instead of having different headquarters of Exxon scattered around the states, they moved everything basically to Texas, and other companies followed suit. But I actually wanted to ask you a question. I was thinking about when they trot out the retired generals. I don't know if this is going to make sense, but the concept in the cyber world of the right to be forgotten. You know how there's
Right.
movements of you can't move past your greatest humiliation in life, except if you're a war
That's happening
criminal.
in Europe. It's not happening in
Europe,
the States
no,
so
I'm
much,
saying
right?
the concept.
Right,
The
yes.
concept. TMZ and all these outlets, and in life, anything you do that's humiliating or will follow you and shame you is reiterated again and again,
That's
except
right.
if you're a war criminal or a right-winger who's wrong.
That's right.
You somehow have that right to be forgotten.
Jesus forgives.
Well, it's very strange. How is
but not
it
so
that
much
a
YouTube.
person who's not that, say it's a Charlie Sheen or an athlete or something, and in many cases, the athlete has done something that you don't want them to be forgotten about. It should be remembered they've done this terrible thing, But just John and Jane Q. Public. Say they do something embarrassing. It's out there forever and it follows them. But then you can have Bill Kristol and
Henry Kissinger.
And Henry Kissinger, who is yet again just on Charlie Rose.
Yes, of course.
Really? How can you get your shoulders up any higher? Like he's like a melting candle. His neck, his head has settled in. The shoulders are way, way up. And
he's like a turtle.
He sits. It literally is like a candle that's just melting. But not even, and him, at least he is an articulate, intelligent guy. You know what I mean? Like, I can see how he gets over. As opposed to some of the Fox guys. Yes. I think he would think Fox was craven.
I think so, but he's also probably, I don't know how you measure this, but he's got to be top 10
Who's to say
criminals.
anymore? Who's to say anymore? He's one of the biggest, most recognizable historically. But there are plenty that have got to be, like, we always think of McNamara, Kissinger. Think about...
Well, Kissinger, I think, was actually far worse even than McNamara.
No,
frankly.
I'm not excusing him. I'm not saying he's not. But here's a guy that when he's on Charlie Rose or on an interview, he's speaking, not trying to curry favor with the fringe, not trying to... He, I believe, would think that some of the neocons, the teabaggers, and Fox is craven.
Yeah, I think so. But I think your point of how is it that that Kissinger can go on to NPR, go on to Charlie
and is
Rose,
respected or applauded,
and nobody brings up the fact that hey, East Timor, or hey, there's really clear evidence that you prolonged the Vietnam War by years.
Except for SNL in the old days, Belushi and Franken and Davis had a couple of jokes about that.
Right.
And every once in a while, George Carlin back then, in a way that a lot of comedians always over the years are the social critics that will say certain things. But you can see war criminals, political actors who are responsible, I think, accessories to mass murder, be lauded, applauded, welcomed onto shows, and thanked even by people like Rachel Maddow, who I respect a great deal. I can't stand when she is so thankful that this person, this neocon criminal, is on her show. Thank you again so much, for coming on the show. Really appreciate your time. That kind of thing. You know what I mean? Or Bill Maher sometimes will say, "Hey, sorry for ganging up on you," to Bill Kristol or one of these liars. But they have this right to be forgotten. You know what I mean? And I know that might sound odd what I'm saying, but why are they the only ones that don't have to relive their worst humiliation, their crimes, if you will? I don't understand that.
Well, they're not humiliated by it.
No, they're not.
That's a very
they should be. What I'm saying, okay, then that's what I'm saying. Their worst humiliation might not be what they're feeling.
Sure.
They should.
Sure.
But
well, maybe that's the key.
They rise up. It's nothing. It's their Teflon. I know they don't care.
Right. Well, they're shameless, and then everything else reflects.
But the public should be apprised of.
Yeah.
Let's show
Right,
you.
right,
Let's
right.
show you.
That should be part of the
If they're
introduction.
gonna say any time that we see Charlie Sheen, or I'm sorry to pick on him, he's going back to 2.5 Men. He owes it to the fans. I just heard that on the radio. But he seems like a very nice guy,
Right,
And
right.
actually, these are things that don't cause mass death. These little foibles and what have you. But he and places like TMZ and Fox and mainstream news will never let these people forget. Somehow they are always to be objects of mockery, pop culture people. But somehow a war criminal who is responsible for death and destruction of people and resources and the planet are welcomed and thanked. And then when they pass away, even if they were like Nixon, whatever, you see lines and lines of people to pay tribute. Then they rewrite history about how great these people were.
I think we covered the Reagan Reagan funeral live on the old Majority Report. And I still remember the moment where you had announced that Peggy Noonan had jumped into the coffin.
The coffin. No, I loved him. Nancy. Peggy Noonan.
I'm sorry.
She irritates
Nancy,
me, that Peggy
mine.
Noonan.
And so, we have I think we covered this quite relatively comprehensively yesterday on the program, but I don't know that there was, I haven't seen any reports of fresh bombings over the night. But we are going in with those stalwarts of freedom, the Saudis, the Bahrainis.
Well, we're not stalwarts of freedom either. So don't make it sound like, hey,
Well,
we're the good. We're
not
above
beheading
reproach.
people for what was it? The Saudi Arabia beheaded people for the other
Hang
day?
on. Murder is murder. Death is death. And
I think they did it for copyright infringement, though.
what I'm saying, whether you behead someone or you torture them or you shoot them or you drop a bomb on them, it's murder and it's death. And it just seems more barbaric to our culture to do it that way.
Right.
But both are wrong.
Ostensibly, we elect people in this country, at least, and so Bahrain is pretty as obviously we critique things like police response to Occupy and definitely what's going on in Ferguson. Bahrain's, they're in a different league than we are.
No, I know there are levels to certain things, but to say that somehow we are this paragon of always being on the right side of history, always being the moral compass, that's just not accurate.
Right. I'm not saying that. That's not my point. My point is that when we talk about, we've lined up these 5 Sunni nations who are supporting what we're doing. I think it can get a little bit overplayed in terms of the moral authority there. I mean, we've lined up a bunch of really quiet.
But hasn't that been the way for a long time?
Of
You
course.
arm certain people that are the supposed moderates, the so-called better or lesser of the evils. This is a common pattern. Again and again and again, we do this, and then there's blowback. And
Right.
it just is just the nature of repetitive warfare.
Well, isn't that
Diplomacy is never the
to be fair,
the
this is
response.
now, I think, eternal warfare, right?
Yeah, yes, I know,
'cause
but
this
it's been
bombing
eternal
campaign's
warfare. We've been in a cycle of eternal warfare to one degree or another for a very long time.
I don't even think we're going to be cycling now. I think we're just going to have
Right, cycle
this
was the wrong word.
constant sort of like ongoing
It's a way of
bombing
life.
campaigns.
It's a way of life.
It's a way of life.
And that's, not just us. There are others, whoever had, once it was Japan, more or less, or before that, Rome, Britain, there are, and as long as there also are lobbying groups, and not just AIPAC, that influence the decisions that are made and what we're not allowed to talk about, things will be normalized and people will be demonized. Do you know what I mean? And it will become mainstream things that other people repeat who don't know that they should maybe be more discerning with their information.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's interesting is sort of this. It's now appearing that these attacks were basically a twofer for the Obama administration. We attack ISIS, we slide in a couple other groups that we feel like it might be good to sort of mow the lawn with these people a little bit. And the good news is that the Obama administration is very confident that no civilians were killed in the Syrian airstrike.
Sure. How could they have been?
No,
I mean, these are...
They emphasized
when you're dropping
yesterday.
something from the air, when you're striking from the air, how could there be collateral damage?
Well,
I mean, come on.
We have the Uber of bombs now.
Didn't we have that, the Moab, the mother of all bombs?
Well, that was the mother of all bombs. This
Moab.
is but I'm talking like the Uber as in the car service. We now have
which
technology.
made my friend Robin get out the other day because the guy had an airport run.
Really?
Have you ever heard of such a thing? She had her luggage, and he stopped on 6th Avenue near my apartment, and he had gotten a more lucrative, I guess, an airport run. He said, "You got to get out."
Wow.
Isn't that crazy? I feel like you could get fired for that.
I feel like she should.
Well, she emailed Uber, and never.
What did you do?
heard back.
Get a free coupon or no?
Nothing yet. Nothing.
Well, we've got the Uber of bombs now, so that they've disrupted the whole bombing industry, where they actually go in. These are super smart bombs.
Do they have zip bomb yet?
They have what's that? What's the zip bomb?
Zip car.
Oh yeah, they have these are super smart bombs. They get down there and they're just like, we told these bombs, you don't hit people.
When I say smart, I'm not talking about like your phone smart. I'm talking about
super smart.
We are as intelligent as a metaphor for something that is so very intelligent.
The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, however, cited by McClatchy as the most authoritative tracker of violence in Syria, told Reuters Tuesday that 8 civilians, including children, were killed in the coalition strikes. How to reconcile those things? I'm gonna choose to believe the Obama administration because we got the Uber of smart bombs.
I'm just really looking forward to the involvement of the Khorasan Group, which sounds like a financial institution.
That's right.
Another one. The Khorasan Group.
They have come
They're
in.
hedge fund guys.
You want to fund terrorism.
Yeah.
But you want it to be an effective use of
and
your
you want
money.
it to be green if
You're
it
a
can.
Kuwaiti sheikh. And you want to fund terrorism
The
efficiently.
Khorasan Group.
The Khorasan Group. More
Shots
bang
of-
for your buck.
They'll do one of those whitewashed ads.
You want carbon offsets before Obama's planted.
Well, hey, they're going to do some carbon stuff by 2030. I mean, just if you can hang in there, they'll think about maybe discussing.
Let's stay on this just a little bit more before
Khorasan
we
Group.
go into
Traditional goals, innovative methods.
Look what I've started. I opened a can of worms over here.